I've been playing a lot of Warhammer 40k Darktide lately, and a funny thing keeps happening. We hammer our way through a mob of pus-filled zombie freaks, demonic dogs, raging mutants. It gets really, really crazy. Then, in the middle of the chaos, I see one unlucky scab get blindsided and battered by a swinging club or a box of unprimed grenades, and we all laugh. And then one of us says, "This game fucking rules," and somebody else goes, "Yeah, it does." The visual feedback in Darktide is second to none. It's gross, satisfying, and really, really funny. And I've been doing this for long enough to know that when something is really, really stupid and funny, someone put a ton of thought and work into it. So I reached out to developer Fatshark to ask them, what is the secret sauce of Darktide's bonks, slashes, gashes, bumps, and thwumps?
That's a big question. I think when looking at getting the impacts right, it needs to both work in isolation, but it needs to convey everything together.
This is Mats Andersson, one of the many gunksmiths behind Darktide's combat. He considers everything from animation to sound to effects.
We use those things to basically make a smorgasbord, if you will, of things we can use to convey meaning.
How much meaning can you extract from hitting a zombie cultist on the head with a metal pipe? A lot. It's not like the meaning of life kind of meaning, but within the brute routine of Darktide's combat, there's still a lot going on. Violence is the language of Darktide, and it is a surprisingly complex language. There is an incredible spectrum of fucked upness that your enemies experience, and it's all important. It takes an enormous amount of tuning, but it's gotta start somewhere. And for Fatshark, it starts with a fantasy.
Before we started Vermintide 1, we looked at sort of in the Lord of the Rings, I think Sauron is hitting a lot of like enemies out on the battlefield in the beginning of the movies. We were like, that kind of feeling we want for our two-handed club, basically. That was the first sort of embryo of what the goal setting on a very, very high level, right? On like, this would be really cool in a game if you were able to actually hit stuff in the same way. They're flying left and right and, ragdolls and all that kind of physics.
Sauron's big swingin' club was the core power fantasy that Fatshark wanted to create when they started work on their first-person hack-and-slash Vermintide more than 5 years ago. They wanted players to feel like a legendary warrior, capable of battering scores of enemies in intimate combat. And that's the fantasy that's carried through to Darktide, even with the addition of guns. To make every hit feel big and correct, they created an impact system.
We tend to go off the deep end as well with the details. So like for Vermintide, we had individual lists for every enemies, every body part for every type of attack, depending on direction of attack, right? So we hand-tuned the ragdoll push directions and how they should throw, because you want to have that thing. If you swing a two-handed hammer and hit someone below the knee, you want to have them tumble like that. It's basically handcrafting thousands of pages of how should the guy what kind of push forces, and then we combine that with the ragdoll setup and the kind of ragdoll system.
The feedback feels so good because it's very specifically tied to your actions. Like this Ogryn Power Maul combo, where the second hit is an upward swing. Every time it lands, it looks like Poochie returning to his home planet.
I have to go now. My planet needs me.
So we handcraft that to push more of the forces onto the torso and the hip of the guy, creating that pushback of the center mass, as opposed to if you're fighting someone and hitting them with a knife, and some of them, like Lass weapons, they have very low push forces, so the guy basically just collapses. But we spend quite a lot of time setting up the tooling and the principles and the mastery of those systems so that we can effortlessly create when we get around to a weapon.
The brilliant thing here is that Fatshark is feeding extremely detailed, context-sensitive parameters into a ragdoll system that also responds to the game world and secondary impacts, creating endless ways for satisfying and slapstick shit to happen. But those goofy ragdoll animations are only applied once an enemy is fully dead. Darktide also needed to account for less lethal interactions with its mobs. In higher difficulty levels, crowd control becomes super important. In the economy of Darktide's combat, stamina is one of your main currencies. It's the regenerating resource you use to sprint, and it's also the resource you use to block. If you're swinging away blindly, you can still take damage. If you block, you avoid damage, but each hit you absorb drains more of that stamina. When it's out, you are taking damage again. That's where the shove comes in. It costs a good chunk of stamina, but it also puts all the enemies near you into a staggered state. And when they're staggered, they can't hit you, so it's your turn again. Those stagger animations are another element of Darktide that need to align with the game's core fantasy while also serving a specific goal within the gameplay design. They need to appear chaotic and organic while also being incredibly precise.
It's the marriage between the kind of the vision of what the spectacle of the game should be and then the gameplay function of it. So you need to marry these, like the physical impacts together with what makes sense within the gameplay. When we go into the mocap sessions, we're working with the same mocap artist that we've always, so he's used to it. It's basically me pushing Niklas around, and he knows how far he gets to move, and I modulate the power of, because I'm a big guy, so we're having fun, and basically go, so I want to have a light stagger, 1.2 seconds, boom, and then he does his thing.
Once again, Stuntman Niklas doing his thing isn't just important for aesthetic reasons. A shove animation that takes too long or too short could break that tightly managed economy of Darktide's combat. So behind every satisfying stumble and tumble, there's a guy who really knows how to throw himself around on a tight deadline, and a team of developers to tune those movements and make them all blend seamlessly into all the other animations. There is so much granularity to Darktide's violence feedback systems that you don't even need to hit an enemy to see it at work. Check this out. So what's the meaning here? Well, from an aesthetic perspective, it's cool. It's empowering. It sells the fantasy that your weapon is dangerous and loud. But it's not just aesthetics, because a near miss is actually helpful. In Darktide, gun-having enemies will shoot you until you close the distance and force them into melee combat. But closing that distance is dangerous, so that's where suppression comes in. Menacing these enemies with gunfire will drive them to cower or run, and when they're doing that, they can't shoot. The flinching is a visual indicator that even if your bullets aren't hitting enemies, they're doing something important. But what about these guys? Nope, they don't flinch. That's because within the delicately balanced combat ecosystem of Darktide, they serve a different purpose. They have no ranged options. They're meant to challenge the player by rapidly closing the distance and swarming. So they're immune to suppression. Having them flinch under fire would send the wrong message. And these behaviors are reinforced by the visual design of the Infested. Most of the enemies in Darktide are under the thrall of the Chaos God Nurgle, but these guys in particular are super far gone. They barely have working brains. Their Living Dead aesthetic reinforces their total lack of self-preservation. When you whack them with a pipe, maggots and green gunk fly out. And if you were hoping that explosion of pus was just some nasty eye candy, I regret to inform you there's also meaning in the blood and guts. The kind of stuff that comes flying out of a target on impact is, like everything else, designed to both instruct the player and reinforce the fantasy. Hitting armored portions of an enemy's body produces sparks, and that lets you know that maybe you should try another approach. A little bit of blood means that you've hit pay dirt, and a lot of bit of blood means that you don't have to worry about that particular scab anymore. That's not to say that Fat Shark is strictly utilitarian. Once a ghoul is dead, there's no tactical reason that a player should keep paying attention to them, but this is a game that's supposed to be fun, and seeing the same canned death animation hundreds of thousands of times would be boring. So to curb that, Fat Shark implemented a nasty wound system. Enemies come apart in lots of ways, based on weapon type, attack direction, and attack location. Their system creates a seemingly endless configuration of ugly demises that blend a dismemberment system, gore decals, canned mocap animations, and ragdolls. This is the closest thing to icing on the cake, but, we need the icing. Now, if I were sitting alone in my home office, cackling at this blood orgy, I would be worried for me too. But it was a social experience, and that makes it better or something. The game's animation and physics reliably produce "did you see that" moments, and for the most part, yeah, we all saw it. This is one of the easiest parts about Darktide's chaos to take for granted, that everybody is seeing the same thing. From what I hear, making online games is really hard. To limit the amount of data getting sent back and forth over a network, a lot of non-essential stuff gets computed on the client side. Like maybe you're playing a game of Destiny and a ragdoll gets stuck in an elevator door and just starts freaking out, and then you ask your friends if they see it and they're like, no. That's because the physics are being rendered locally for each player. Usually this is fine because it's not that important, but with up-close physical combat being so core to Darktide's appeal, Fat Shark made an extra effort to make those shared moments more common.
The ragdoll bits and all of the post-mortem stuff that happens to a guy that's purely client side, But so we do try to feed out the correct predictions to the clients. So your guy will probably not be flying exactly the same, but very, very close to the same. So if you have a death animation and someone is like stumbling around without an arm or a leg, or someone, I know the Ogryn comes in and just throws a box at him and he goes flying, that is just comedy gold, right? And you want to share that because then it becomes more fun.
It's a fun case study in how much substance you can find in style. And if you really examine it up close, it's also a testament to the fact that the line between style and substance is kind of messy. The feedback games give us can be useful info or satisfying spectacle. It's best when they're both. I also like it when it's nasty.